Welcome to State of Tech, Synechron's innovation podcast. Synechron is a leading global digital transformation consulting firm focused on financial services and big technology organizations. Our State of Tech podcast hosts subject matter experts and business leaders as they explore emerging technologies, industry insights, innovation trends, and more. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Synechron's State of Tech podcast series, where we ignite conversations that matter. Today, Ryan Cox, head of AI at Synechron, and myself, Tim Jennings, head of data, will be discussing a topic that's as controversial as it is fascinating: the impact of AI on elections across the globe.
We'll explore the multifaceted roles AI plays, from enhancing the democratic process to presenting new challenges that need addressing. We'll examine the positive breakthroughs, the ethical dilemmas, and the unforeseen consequences that come with integrating advanced technologies into the very fabric of our political systems. So Tim, it's great to be here with you again. We just did a podcast recently on the EU AI Act, and this topic really hits close to home. So we've got global elections this year. Over half of the human population, 2 to 3 billion voters, will be going to the polls in 50 plus countries. So from your perspective, what do you think the most significant impacts of AI on the elections and democracy will be?
The other interesting thing I think about this year is it's the first time when we have a really genuinely plausible AI threat to elections. We've seen in previous elections the use of data science and analytics to really target, really hone the message on voters and to nudge them into certain behaviors. But with the use of AI, we sort of get that on steroids. So we already know through social media and the avenues that people consume news and views that you can very rapidly end up in an echo chamber of your own views where those things come back at you so that the other views are excluded. What's new with AI and the use of deepfakes particularly is that false news, fake news, genuinely deceptive information can now be presented in that in a way that looks and feels utterly plausible. And that creates a very significant problem for voters. How do you know what's real anymore? How can you understand those sources of truth? And if you don't know what's real, if you're not sure what to trust, how are you supposed to make an informed vote? It's quite a fundamental problem for democracy, I think.
That's actually a really big impact. You mentioned briefly in prior elections, there was a little bit of data manipulation and some tampering. I assume you're referring to the Cambridge Analytica piece. Yeah, so for the listeners, that was where a company used a lot of different data and misdirection to nudge voters into voting for a different party. So it wasn't quite to the degree that we're seeing maybe of deepfakes, but it was finding those voters that are most susceptible and nudging them over the line so that it could swing the election, particularly in places where it's close. But Tim, you just opened up a whole can of worms with Gen AI for doing that at even larger scales and doing it at a much more realistic view so that audiences really don't know what to believe and what to trust.
And with the voter profiling and the ability to customize that message to really push your buttons, I can see it being a credible threat to making an informed choice. Let's put it that way. You've been looking at this for a little while as well. What are your feelings about the use of deepfakes in this space? Have there been examples in the elections this year where deepfakes have been used?
There have been a number of deepfake examples that have already come to light. If we look recently in India's election commission had to issue an advisory urging all political parties to refrain from employing these tactics. That actually came into play when Prime Minister Modi was reportedly targeted by these deepfakes, which at the end actually led to police involvement in multiple arrests. They actually had deep fakes of these Bollywood actors saying things that weren't true, which when you distribute that on social media across 1 billion plus individuals, that can have huge impacts on elections. And as you mentioned, what are voters meant to believe at the end of it?
Absolutely. There are other examples where people try to present positive pictures. There are examples from Donald Trump's campaign, for example, where he's been posing with African Americans in what have proven to be faked pictures.
Sounds like it can go both ways. It can be used as something to persuade folks to not vote for somebody, but it can also be persuaded to vote for someone. It becomes a pretty tricky conversation. Then you get into the robocalls situation in America where purportedly Joe Biden's deep fake was telling people not to vote at all. That's yet another scenario that can happen.
I'm interested to know how we combat that. But before we go into the technology approaches, how AI can maybe heal itself, as it were, let's turn our attention a little bit to the regulation and legislation framework that's emerging, shall we say, in this space. I don't think it's concrete yet. As I said, it's a fundamental principle of our society. We need to be able to underpin elections with a level of trust. Have you looked at the way the regulations are developing?
Regulations aim to cover these synthetic images, the audio, the video, the pictures, and they're really focusing on preventing events or statements which did not occur. One of the key areas is looking at paid campaign ads in the US and some of those other widely disseminated communications. There's very clear calls to make sure that these forms of deepfakes are not distributed. And I think the new bill is called the REAL, R-E-A-L in caps, Political Advertisements Act. And so that really mandates a disclaimer on all the AI generated content and political ads, and you have some reporting responsibilities within the US. So I think many countries are looking at this. They're coming out with strong statements. So right now we're very much at a stage where we want the public to be aware that this is happening. And certainly, as you mentioned, there are some benefits to the technology. We'll touch on it a little bit later, but we really just need to understand what's possible and that there are some laws that are up and coming.
Fascinatingly, of course, from our previous conversation about the European AI Act, deepfakes are not considered a high-risk use of AI. In the light of this conversation, I think it's something that should be at least thought about again.
That's a great point. The EU AI Act covered a number of things around risk assessments, and deepfakes surprisingly didn't score that highly up. There might be something along the lines of coercing individuals to do something at a national level that maybe there's still time for updates to the EU AI Act or for other regulations to come into play. But you're right, that's a fundamental gap that we see missing.
We are seeing the industry begin to try and swing behind this. The recent Munich Security Conference, we had a number of signatories to the AI Elections Accord. Microsoft, IBM, Google, Meta, TikTok, LinkedIn, X. OpenAI were also a part of that. Many of the great and good of the AI technology community and the social media community appear to be taking this seriously. The upshot of those commitments are that they are promising to detect AI election content on their platforms and to address such content appropriately. They're trying to foster cross-industry resilience to deceptive AI content, so to try and identify and prevent this, and deal transparently with how their company is going to be processing this information, what it's going to be doing, how it's going to be making it apparent to people, which content is trustworthy, which is not. So chain of custody sort of conversations. There are some looser obligations coming out of that around efforts to support public awareness, to develop and implement tools to mitigate risk from deceptive AI election content, and to engage with some civil society organizations and academics about how to manage this going forward. So that's not based on regulation. The regulation's coming, but we are seeing some positive steps coming out of the firms that are at the forefront of this election battleground, as it were.
I think it will be interesting to see how it's enforced as well. It will be interesting to see rubber hits the road, what's actually going to happen, because you look at Twitter, x.com, right? Sure, they're signing up to this pledge, but there have been a number of examples recently where they've left media on the platform that was questionable or that was later attributed to a deep fake. And maybe it was on the platform for a while, it gained notoriety. And then sometimes you'll see after the fact, other news articles get linked back to the original post even once it's taken down. Just because it's taken down doesn't mean it doesn't exist anymore. So there's a lot of implications that need to get thought through, because once something's out there, it's in people's mind.
Let's take a more positive look at this then. Let's see if we can work out what maybe can be done to protect elections. How do you see the use of AI to actually preserve the integrity of the election process?
There's a couple main areas. I think when you look at that benefit side of where AI can help, one of them is looking at enhanced voter registration accuracy. AI in general can improve the accuracy and efficiency of that voter registration process. It can help automate data verification. It can detect anomalies. So understand where things are coming up in the polls that are out of joint from where it was in previous elections or what's expected from that demographic. You could have real-time fraud detection. So AI could monitor and analyze these voting patterns in real time and effectively mobilize staff and support to investigate that in real time. I think what we saw in some of the prior US elections was weeks after the fact, questions came out questioning the authenticity of votes and whatnot. So I think if you have AI in real time, you could potentially react a little bit sooner, closer to the incident, and get a little bit better response.
Could you imagine a world where we had live video streaming from polling stations and we're actually monitoring the number of people going in and out and checking that against the number of votes cast, for example? That would be quite a concrete refutation of someone calls foul on an election. Other areas, particularly the US, use voting machines. And again, those are vulnerable to cyber attacks. And you might be using AI to help protect that or try and defend or identify where that's potentially happening. You could use AI to give you a level of confidence that you're seeing expected behavior or identify an alert on unexpected behavior.
Even coming back in and out of the countries, we look at how the technology and AI is used to improve facial recognition and processes to get to identify individuals and get them in and out of the country. Maybe some of that technology could be applied to voting stations as well, because effectively that's monitoring in real time what's happening. Obviously, there's a lot of security that need to be understood, but certainly a lot of benefits could be deployed here.
I think there's potentially some ethical concerns with that as well. So, for example, in the UK, we've only very recently introduced any rules meaning you have to bring ID with you. So actually doing facial recognition ID, having a database of everyone's facial recognition information, which you're using for voter registration, would be a significant step in some countries. I guess it depends on how big we think the risk is and what we're actually trying to protect against. But yes, if we can get ourselves to a world where the process of the election is being protected by AI, and where the process of information and disinformation is being overseen by AI, we're potentially in a better place than we are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it will pave the way for future elections. I think we're going to learn a lot. I don't think everything is going to go 100% smoothly, but hopefully with a little bit of advance warning, with a bit of technology, I think we can come out of it in relatively good shape, with certainly things to apply and lessons learned for future elections.
So the key takeaway is that AI, whilst a powerful tool, must be developed and used with a strong ethical framework to truly benefit the electoral processes and society at large. AI can do many things, but we must choose to use it right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tim. I think we're in control of how we choose to use these tools. And hopefully, as legislation around the use of AI becomes formalized worldwide, we'll see an era where the benefits of this technology can be fully realized without compromising the democratic process as we know it.
Thank you to our listeners for joining today. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Synechron State of Tech podcast. Don't forget to like and share this episode and subscribe to stay up to date on all of the latest and innovative technologies savvy businesses need to know about. To learn more about Synechron, head to our website at www.synechron.com. Stay tuned.